Alex and Dean.
Welcome, beautiful people of all ages, shapes, and colors, to another episode of the Hit Your Free Throws podcast, where we encourage you to stick to the basics. I'm one of your co-hosts, TV, aka TV on Basketball, alongside my co-host, Jay, aka The Knockdown. Jay, how's it going, my guy?
Man, it's going okay, man. NBA trade deadline. It's like Christmas to NBA fans. Some of us get presents, some of us get cold. You guys can tell us in the comments which section you fall into. But today we got a lot of trades to break down and TV. It should be interesting to see how some of these teams move forward after what we've seen today.
Yeah, there is a lot of trades to go through, and I'm telling you guys right now, nothing too crazy, but there's definitely some moves that are changing the trajectory of the NBA a bit, especially with the big teams going hard for the fences with some of these. So we're gonna talk about all of that. We're gonna go through each and every trade, whether we talk about them a lot or a little, we'll determine that later. But we're gonna get to everything. So be on the lookout for that. But yeah, we're gonna get into that really quickly. But before we do have to plug our own socials. Remember to follow our personal socials at the Knockdown J, at the Routine Jumper, as well as TV on Basketball Podcast. You can find that all in the descriptions down below. If you're following us on TikTok and Instagram, you already know that's where the best daily NBA content is. NBA trade deadline, stuff going up to the All-Star break, the clips, everything will be found in the Hit Your Free Throws pod page. If you're a YouTube member, to like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, that would be highly, highly appreciated. And if you're listening on any of the podcast network, Spotify, Apple, leave a review, subscribe, all that good stuff. Jay, like you mentioned, there's a lot to get into. You ready to talk some NBA trades?
Yeah, man. Let's start with the one that was probably the most ineffective in terms of impact this year, but oddly tells us a lot about some stuff moving forward.
Yeah, 100%. And we're actually going to go all the way back to last Friday, because
Yeah.
the first trade of NBA Trade Week was Steven Adams getting traded from the Memphis Grizzlies to the Houston Rockets in exchange for Victor Oladipo, who was waived today, and 2 second-round picks. Jay, not a major trade, but give me your quick thoughts.
So I think the main thing for me in this one is just that the Houston Rockets clearly are just trying to bolster up the talent pool on their team. I think that Fred VanVleet was sneakily one of the best pickups this past all season because it's given the Houston Rockets a real understanding of who fits best on their roster. Alperen Sengun is really good and he's been really healthy, but they don't have a ton of backline talent in terms of the front court. Steven Adams is a real bruiser, gives them a lot of opportunity. He's not going to be effective this season, obviously, with him being out for the year, but the Rockets have an incentive to win now. So the best thing they can do is to try to bolster up their talent. They're not a team that's going to be very big on free agency in terms of just being able to acquire top tier talent. It's a lot of other markets that have interesting money or interesting cap flexibility. The Rockets did something small here, but I think that it could be interesting once we see Steven Adams on the court. For the Grizzlies, I have no clue what's going on with them in terms of their front court depth. We'll kind of get into this a little deeper when we get to a trade that took place today. The Grizzlies must have just forgotten that like the center position still exists in basketball, and this was
Yeah.
like the first domino to fall for that.
Yeah, a lot of questionable Memphis Grizzlies moves in general. Like we saw them the other night play with like 5 or 6 two-way contract guys. We don't know what's going on in Memphis, but we're gonna talk about that later. I think this is a good move for the Rockets. You get a big to not only be a good backup next year to Alperen Sengun, but someone who can cover up for some of Alp's, I wouldn't say misfortunes, but some of his weaknesses. Someone who is big on screen, someone who is a very good rebounder in his day, someone who just brings a different element to the center position that the Rockets don't have, and they're desperately needing that at the moment. They're not going to get it next year, but at least giving up 2 second-round picks for a player that could be effective for you next season, I don't think it's a bad deal. And Oladipo, ever since the injury, basically has no value anywhere. He's been tossed around like no tomorrow. So I think it's a good trade for the Rockets. The Grizzlies, a lot of gathering of picks, and that's going to continue to be a trend as we go do these other trades.
Mm.
Now we're going to go into the next trade, which finally happened, which kind of started like into this like whole 24-hour thing window of trades that happened. Starting with this one, Simone Fontecchio. Yes, the player. I think was this the one that you mentioned
Yes.
with the other?
Yeah. This was the little low-key guy we were talking about when we shouted him on the podcast a couple weeks ago.
100%. I mean, he was a starter for the Utah Jazz, and he ends up getting traded to the Detroit Pistons in exchange for Kevin Knox, the right to prospect Gabriel Procida,
Mhm.
and a 2024 second round pick. Jay, Your boy's moving to the Pistons. How you feel?
Hey man, look, my boy Simone Fontecchio automatically becomes the third or fourth best player on the Pistons today. You feel me? You feel me? It's good
You ain't
works
lying.
around here.
You ain't lying.
Anytime you trade Kevin Knox for a player who's supposed to start in somebody else's rotation, you've automatically upgraded the roster. You feel me?
Yeah.
Come on now. Now the weirdest part for Utah is when Fontecchio was in the lineup, the starting lineup specifically, he was really their only three-size guy. Now, when you look at this moving forward, this probably indicates in some semblance that they want to play Taylor Hendricks more. Obviously, that, Walker Kessler is still relatively, between the backup and starting center position for them. This probably leans more towards Lauri Markkanen starting at the 3, right? That's probably the most indicative thing of this kind of move. But it's a little weird because Simone Fontecchio was kind of this mini representation of the competency that the Utah Jazz started to find over the last couple of weeks, where they were playing some really good basketball. And Will Hardy was putting together a pretty good little starting five with some kind of real semblance of like competency on the floor, because they were struggling with all of these like makeshift lineups for the earlier portion of the season. So to me, this looks like maybe the Utah Jazz doing their due diligence to kind of punt kick the season. There's another trade that comes up a little that kind of further delves into that, where I think the Utah Jazz, as much as they have this, I think they have a trade, they have a draft pick that's supposed to convey this year unless they fall into the top 10. Most people speculated that maybe they would just want to go ahead and let it convey this year, fall outside the top 10, be kind of decent, let it pass and be what it is. It sounds like, despite the fact that so many people are big on this draft being bad, they're not necessarily against the idea of possibly going ahead and getting a top 10 pick in this year's draft. And I can't really blame them. At the end of the day, I mean, you don't really know how bad a draft is once you get down to the 20s and the 25s, right? So, like, I think if they have the opportunity for a top 10 pick while it's still feasible, they should position themselves for it. This was today for Utah, a little aggressive, but you can tell that they're still trying to go through the actual rebuilding process, and they've just scarily always outperformed.
Yeah, no, this just shows again, like, the competence of Will Hardy, the fact that he has a system in there that no matter who's in the lineup, they still try to find success as long as they have more market on the floor, of course.
Right.
But yeah, this trade, that's exactly what I was thinking. It opens up for Taylor Hendricks. I thought it was going to open up some more minutes for Ochai Agbaji, but we're going to talk about that later. But
right.
but at the end of the day, the Jazz got a very high second round pick. Remember, this is the Wizards second round pick. It's going to be like in the 30 to like the 31 to 34 range or something like that. So they get a decently high second round pick. Kevin Knox is really just filler in this trade, but they did this just so you have someone that you don't have to pay in Fontecchio. You don't have to pay if you do want to extend him, and that just opens up more room for Taylor Hendricks to finally get into the rotation. Maybe we could see how he does and start his development. I like this trade for the Pistons because you finally get some more competency at the 3 position, and the Jazz continue in the direction that they're supposed to, and they get a decent second round pick for this upcoming year. So I think it's a good trade on both sides. Moving on to the next one, another low end trade here. We have Xavier Tillman being traded from the Memphis Grizzlies in exchange, from the Memphis Grizzlies to the Boston Celtics in exchange for Lamar Stevens, a 2027 Hawks second rounder, and a 2030 second rounder from the Celtics as well. Jay, any thoughts on this one?
This trade was weird to me because this is what I meant when I was talking about the Steven Adams thing earlier. It's like all of a sudden the Memphis Grizzlies forgot about the center position. Like the only guy who even validates himself as a big man now is Jaren Jackson. And I don't fully understand what's going on with Memphis in terms of what their plans are moving forward. And they basically gave the Celtics a backup rotation center for a bag of chips, like essentially in terms of what you're talking about for the Celtics and what they're trying to do this year. Xavier Tillman helps the Celtics in a way that a lot of casual people may not understand. But let me put it this way. Xavier Tillman was one of the primary defenders on LeBron James during the Memphis Grizzlies series against the Los Angeles Lakers a season ago. And Anthony Davis. And I'm not going to say that he was some kind of stopper or anything, but he was relatively effective in his time on the floor, especially on the defensive end. Now, we know he has his offensive limitations, but that's not necessarily what he's on the floor for. And specifically with a team like the Boston Celtics, they're not going to ask Xavier Tillman to have much of an offensive responsibility anyway. This is also big for the Celtics because one of the biggest things about finishing out the regular season this year, particularly for the Celtics, is coming into the playoffs healthy. Specifically, 2 guys, Kristaps Porzingis and Al Horford. These are two guys that if you even look throughout their schedule, there's a typical flow that tends to take place throughout this season. Whenever the Boston Celtics have a back-to-back, one of either Kristaps Porzingis or Al Horford miss one of either of those games. Like basically they split back-to-backs. That puts you in a position where you don't have as much of a back line. You really only have Luke Cornett, which isn't a bad guy or anything like that. He's actually been scarily like effective for them. Not like, putting up numbers or anything, but he does well within his role. But Xavier Tillman gives them another real legitimate like placeholder at the center position to kind of help take the onus off of Kristaps Porzingis and Al Horford. Those are two guys you need in the postseason. You're gonna need them. Period, point blank. That's how you guard Giannis. That's how you, if Embiid comes back, that's how you guard Embiid, right? That's how you handle a Jokic in the finals. If you get to that point, you need those guys healthy. If Xavier Tillman can be able to handle some of the scratch, that's a win. And for this, Lamar Stevens and 2 second-round picks that probably would never have made their roster at any point anyway, right? I mean, it's basically a steal. I'm not gonna lie.
It really was. Luke Cornett and shout out to Neemias like Queta or something of his name.
Neemias Queta?
Queta. Yeah, those are two were getting like a decent amount of minutes when those guys were resting on the back-to-backs, Porzingis and Al Horford. But the Xavier Tillman trade does just provide some stability at that center position, which I'm glad not just the Celtics, but other teams like got that stability as well in this trade deadline. But I think the Celtics took advantage of the fact that Xavier Tillman's having probably one of the worst seasons of his career. He's usually around a 60% guy from the field goal, as a field goal percentage, but he's at like 40% this year, which is really rare for him. So he's not having the type of season that you would expect out of Xavier Tillman, but we know how he performs in the playoffs. He was a starting center on a Memphis Grizzlies team that made it to the second round. He is a quality NBA player, and sure, maybe he's not having the best season this year. Maybe it has to do with a lot of responsibility due to the absence of Steven Adams, due to the amount of like change in the roster rotation because of the amount of injuries that they had to deal with. But they get themselves a legitimate backup center. So just in case, because we know the injury history of Al Horford and Porzingis, especially. But as long as you have that like backup center who can eat up some minutes and he's not going to cost you anything, it's really key in those like placeholder minutes in the playoffs. And I think Xavier Tillman can do that. And who knows, he can have like moments in the playoffs where like a 5-minute stretch in like a third quarter of a second round, he can like provide you with maybe like 10 straight points or something like out of nowhere. That can be a difference between you winning a championship and you not. So Xavier Tillman, he's shown that he can perform in the playoffs, and I think that he could do very similar things as a member of the Boston Celtics. So I do like this trade for both sides as well. Next trade we're going to talk about is probably the biggest trade from yesterday. Monte Morris being traded away from the Detroit Pistons to the Minnesota Timberwolves, who were desperately needing a backup point guard in exchange for Shake Milton, Troy Brown Jr., and a 2030 second rounder from the Minnesota Timberwolves as well. Jay, thoughts on this trade?
So obviously my guy Tyus Jones was the main guy in conversation for this acquisition initially before all of this popped off. And I actually thought it was going to be a really good fit. Obviously, he's a Minnesota kid, first off, drafted by the Minnesota Timberwolves, comes to this team. And yes, he would probably be the backup point guard behind Mike Conley. But Mike Conley could come up off the books this summer. It gives him an opportunity to potentially come in and be the starting point guard. It all seemed like it could line up in a way where with the way that Tyus plays compared to Mike Conley, it would be a very nice transition. Monte Morris is probably a step right below that, but still checks all the boxes that they're looking for. The number one box that needs to be checked is Monte Morris's focus on not turning over the basketball. That is probably the most important thing for the Minnesota Timberwolves, and it's actually the most indicative thing of why Mike Conley has been so important this season. This team is much different and much more effective when Mike Conley has been on the floor as opposed to when he's been off the floor. And we love Anthony Edwards. We love talking about the effectiveness of Karl Anthony Towns on the offensive end, the effectiveness of Rudy Gobert on the defensive end. But they all acted as kind of separate entities. Mike Conley is kind of the straw that stirs the drink and has been able to really help that team hone in. Monte Morris now makes it, if he gets on the floor, because that's kind of the most important thing here, because newsflash, Monte Morris has not played very much this season.
Yeah.
But if Monte Morris gets on the floor, you're gonna be able to get 48 minutes of effective, smart, and efficient point guard play. And when you look at all the other talent that they have, talking about the Minnesota Timberwolves on both sides of the floor, if you have 48 minutes of competent and effective point guard play with that group, you are now one of the most dangerous teams in the Western Conference. So it's going to come down to Monte playing. If he plays, this could be really great. If he doesn't, this could kind of look a little stupid, even with the fact that Shake Milton and Troy Brown weren't really playing.
Yeah, they were at the end of rotation guys as well anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But people forget Monte Morris was a very good backup point guard there in the Denver Nuggets, especially during the pandemic era. The year after that, he was a competent backup point guard. And one of the biggest things, and like you mentioned there, the turnovers are the biggest thing with the Minnesota Timberwolves, especially in the fourth quarter, the highest turnover rate out of any team in the fourth quarter. That's why they end up losing to like these lower end teams, because they just let them back into the game. What Monte Morris does is keep the ball safe. His highest turnover per game in his whole career is one turnover game.
Right.
One of the best assisted turnover, like one of the best turnover rates in the league. And I think I saw like a stat on that, like on Instagram or something the other day. And it's just really funny how like that's the Timberwolves' biggest like weakness, and they literally just got the guy near the top of the list. Monte Morris has not played meaningful basketball in a few years since he's been a member of the Denver Nuggets. If they get any sort of that version of Monte Morris, the Minnesota Timberwolves do in exchange for like what, the second round pick and 2 end of rotation guys, it's a good trade for them. It seems like the guys that they were trying to target, like mainly looking at Tyus Jones, was a bit too much of an ask. You know, maybe they might have to give up too many assets to get him. So getting someone like Monte Morris, who has had some good seasons in the past, as well, is just like a nice low risk, high reward type player. And it makes it so, just in case Mike Conley, I mean, he can't play as much minutes as he can anyway, but he can like fill in those minutes, and he can do completely fine there. It's a good backup point guard. If he can like perform in the playoffs like he has in the past, I think it's a really good trade for the Timberwolves, just because they didn't have to give up too much. So good move for the Timberwolves, and that solves a problem which they've been missing for a while. They thought Shake Milton can be that. He didn't turn out to be that good for them. So I think getting Monte Morris as an upgrade was really, really nice. Now we're moving into today's trades. And we started off, honestly, with a trade that got me pretty excited. Buddy Hield traded from the Indiana Pacers in exchange for 3 second-round picks, Furkan Korkmaz, the man who has demanded trades every single season and never got his request, finally gets traded, and Marcus Morris. Jay, I mean, this Pacers got whatever, but Buddy Hield to the 76ers, what do you think?
I'm not going to lie, this one was a little odd to me, but I think the biggest indication for me is I'm glad the Sixers aren't giving up on the year. I think this also that might be one of those trades that is a small indication of something much bigger than the team structure. Remember, when we were looking at the information related to Joel Embiid's injury, the bright side of it was that they were looking at about 4 weeks. Now, he's not going to actually return to the floor in 4 weeks. He's going to be reevaluated. So we're looking at an injury that might hold him back for about 6 to 8 weeks. We're basically walking ourselves into the postseason. This kind of trade to me, though, indicates optimism that he is going to be ready when that timeline comes up. And that's huge, because now you get a knockdown shooter in Buddy Hield for pennies on the dollar, if we're being honest, when we look at the actual acquisition, a bunch of second-round picks, Marcus Morris, who wasn't necessarily effective for him, and Furkan Korkmaz, who, again, like you mentioned beforehand, seems to not necessarily be happy anywhere that he ends up, to be honest. But this is huge. I do think, in a way, Buddy Hield is very effective for what it is that they're trying to do. Getting another shooter is big for Philly in particular. But I do think this move is more indicative of how they feel about Joel Embiid this season than it is necessarily roster construction for the Sixers moving forward.
Yeah, no, I like that they're still going for it. And Embiid's injury, of course, led a lot of people like kind of questioning, is this kind of the end of the Sixers season? What the 76ers are going to do? They're still aggressive, and you just love to see that. Buddy Hield helps their 3-point shooting problems a lot. Yes, he's not having the best 3-point shooting this season. He's at 38% compared to his like usual like 40 to 45% 3-point percentage. But he's still one of the best shooters in the league. And you gave up 2 guys that weren't really playing for you anyways and 3 second-round picks for someone who is going to be an expiring contract, but is someone who's going to play a big role for you this season. As for the Pacers, this trade was kind of coming, because I swear Buddy Hield has been on the trade block for years now for Indiana. But just because like they had a bunch of young guys in the roster, they just didn't want to end up paying Buddy Hield the bag after the season. And with a trade later on, they kind of, I wouldn't say replaced the production of Buddy Hield, but they got the 3-point shooting back, which we'll discuss later. But I think it was a good trade for the 76ers. I guess you got exactly what you needed if you're the Pacers, which is some draft capital. But at the end of the day, at least the 76ers are still competing and are looking to compete for the remainder of the season. And hopefully that means Embiid comes back before the end of the season and stays relatively healthy throughout the playoffs. Moving on to the next trade. Do you have any thoughts on the trade, by the way? Were you going to say something?
Not really.
Okay, moving on. The Toronto Raptors. Yes, my Toronto Raptors actually made a couple of trades this Thursday, and this was the first one. And this one honestly came out of nowhere for me because I didn't think a trade like this was going to happen. The Raptors trade Otto Porter Jr., Kira Lewis Jr., and least notable first-round pick of the Thunder, Clippers, whatever. So basically a low 20s pick in exchange for Ochai Agbaji and Kelly Olynyk. This is one of the bigger trades of this trade deadline day. But Jay, the Raptors, a little bit of aggressive move. People thought we were going full rebuild, but they ended up trading a first round pick. What do you think of this trade?
Hey man, Darko said that your boy Scotty was an all-star. They found out that he was getting in the all-star game and they just started acting up, boy. I'm letting you know right now. The Raptors was real active today. They found out Scotty Barnes was an all-star and they said we got to start building for the now, not the future. Kelly Olynyk, he's going to come up as a low-key guy every single trade deadline. And every single trade deadline, we get the same spiel. He's a connector. He's a good passer. He's an effective floor spacer. He's a guy who just kind of creates a lot of stability on the floor. I'm not going to lie. For a team like the Toronto Raptors, Kelly Olynyk fits relatively well. He helps set guys up. He creates real opportunities. His passing should open up a lot more on the floor for this team. You wish that this team had a little bit more three-point shooting to really help open up the skill set that Kelly Olynyk has, but Kelly does bring some of that floor spacing himself. Ochai Agbaji here, I think he's going to be the interesting wild card. I wonder where he gets his burn in the rotation between the guard forward spots because he's played both in Utah. So it'll be interesting to see how much burn, if any, that he really gets with the Raps.
Trust me, he will be. We need.
I think the main thing is this is a we need points trade to me in terms of the scoring punch that you guys need on this team. And I like it. It's very on the margins, despite the fact I agree with you. From my perspective, it is a little aggressive for this team, but it's an on the margins trade that makes them better in a way that's more noticeable when you watch the game than when you read about it afterwards.
Oh yeah, no, 100%. These are two absolute positions of need that the Raptors needed to address. After trading away OG, after trading away Pascal Siakam, we were desperately needing some wing play, which is really rare for the Toronto Raptors because we talked about this before. Masai used to build rosters around 6'9" demigods that he was hoping to build over here. And now we got rid of most of them. So we definitely needed some wing play. Ochai Agbaji brings that. And Kelly Olynyk. When I tell you that our backup center position was dying, it was dying because when Jakob Poeltl went down, we had to use Michael Porter Jr.'s brother, Jontay Porter, a lot of games. And although he was solid, honestly, he was a bit of a diamond in the rough there for Toronto. It was still pretty rough when he was a starting center to the point where we had to use Thaddeus Young as a starting center for a lot of times, and that didn't end up going well either. This solidifies the center position, which is great. And Toronto, man, we're just continuing to build Team Canada. We have RJ now. We have Kelly Olynyk, and we have Chris Boucher. Team Canada is being formed right here, right now. You love to see it. But I think that this was a good trade. I know a lot of people were confused by the fact that we used the first-round pick here, but I'll tell you this. We still have a chance to get our pick. It's top 6 protected from the San Antonio Spurs. If it doesn't, if we get that pick this year, it's going to convey to next year. It's whatever. But if we end up getting a top 6 pick, we're going to get it. We also have the Indiana Pacers 2024 first-round pick, wherever they may land. And we also have the Detroit Pistons second-round pick, which is 31. Let's be honest. It's going to be number 31 in this year's draft. So trading away a 2024 first-round pick of probably the Thunder or the LA Clippers was basically like what, the 29th or 30th overall pick. We were just oversaturated with picks in this year's draft, and I think the Raptors looked at it as like, we need players for now, but also that can continue our rebuilding, vision. And even though Kelly Olynyk is clearly the best player in this trade, I think they did this for Ochai Agbaji. Ochai Agbaji has been a couple years removed from being a lottery pick in the NBA. Got traded in the Donovan Mitchell trade, got a little bit of burn with the Utah Jazz. He was supposed to be a knockdown shooter coming out of the draft, one of the best catch and shoot guys, correct to be D guy. He hasn't really found his role yet. But with the Raptors developmental system, with the direction that we're going, he's going to be someone who's going to play some decent amount of minutes. Because if we can get that out of him, the 3-point shooting and the defending, sure, he's not going to be able to handle the ball and everything. But if we're able to get him for the traits that the Cavs saw on him, the Utah Jazz saw on him, then this is going to be a really good piece, especially when you already have ball handlers and Emmanuel Quickley, R.J. Barrett, Scotty Barnes. We're going to see a lot of those guys handling the ball, and if this guy can go out there, move around the perimeter, shoot the 3 ball pretty well, as well as play good defense, he's going to fit right in. And only at 23 years of age, I think is a great trade for the Toronto Raptors. The first round pick looks daunting, but when you really look at it, it's really not as bad as you think.
I agree. I think this is one of those things where the Raptors did something really on the margins and it worked out both ways. You get a veteran center. Like you said, backup center was rough for you guys. Definitely fills a hole now. And like you said beforehand, being able to get a semi blue chip prospect in the process for a low 30 for a low first round pick. It's one of those things, like you said, it's going to go over some people's heads, but I think it's going to play out on the floor pretty good.
Yeah, but a lot of this has to do with how Ochai Agbaji is able to develop. So we're going to wait and see. Hopefully, Darko gives him a run in his system, and we get to see him on the floor very soon. So good trade for the Raptors. Moving on to the next trade, Oklahoma City Thunder. Did they trade for Lauri Markkanen? No. Did they make the big splash? No. You know what they got? They got Gordon Hayward. Gordon Hayward in this trade in exchange for Terrence Mann, Trey Mann, Davis Bertans, and another prospect named Micic. Jay, how is this trade for OKC?
Dude, when I saw this, every outlet that I saw when it first initially happened, signed it off as like a blockbuster trade. And I understand who Gordon Hayward is.
I saw photoshops of Gordon Hayward in like a big three, which is kind of crazy.
I'm like, dude, Gordon Hayward hasn't played since right after Christmas, bro. It's February 8th and he hasn't played since I believe December 26th or something. We need to even see this dude on the floor. He's only averaging 14 points a game this year in the time that he's been on the floor. I think he's only played 25, 26 games on the year.
Yeah.
This is kind of similar to the Monte Morris thing, but actually has a little bit of a tier above it. If Gordon Hayward plays for the Oklahoma City Thunder, this could be really good. Gordon Hayward is another ball handler. He's another facilitator. He's a very smart player. He's very, very good off the ball. We think that he could be effective in a catch and shoot scenario. That would really help them. And the most important thing, which actually works out a lot for the Oklahoma City Thunder, is he's a really good connector, which is huge for a team like this that likes to get out and run, because that means if they come up off the glass and Gordon Hayward gets it, he's effectively able to push the ball and be able to look ahead. If he's a guy that sees a rebound off the glass, he understands how to be able to leak out and make himself available. And if he does not necessarily get the basket, he can help create that open shot for somebody else. Gordon Hayward, when healthy, can really just be a very smart connecting piece for the Oklahoma City Thunder. Not necessarily the all-star caliber guy that Lauri Markkanen is in terms of what we were hoping the Oklahoma City Thunder would go after, but a tier below that in terms of what he brings to the table. He's also a guy, nobody's going to really want to talk about this, but he's a guy that makes up for a lot of Josh Giddey's shortcomings specifically. Yeah. Josh Giddey is a very good ball handler. He's very effective in the pick and roll, and I like that he's very aggressive in terms of running to the rack. Does not shoot the 3 ball well. And he's been doing better this year, but on very low volume and things considered. Gordon Hayward gives you that stretch ability from another ball handler that makes him a threat next to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, where now when you look at a lineup where it has Shai, Jalen Williams, Gordon Hayward, Chet Holmgren, insert center here, or you could put like a Cason Wallace or something. Now you have 4 or 5 guys who all can shoot. They have a lineup with Gordon Hayward inquired in it that could basically create a 5-out lineup while still containing a ton of size. Gordon Hayward healthy, this could be dope. Gordon Hayward hasn't been healthy in 2 months, so TBD. That's where I'm going to stand on it.
Yeah. Was he actually injured, or was it just one of those things where the Hornets were like, "Yeah, we're just not going to play you," and just hope that we find
So I believe he was injured and they probably just milked it. So it'll be interesting to see if the Oklahoma City Thunder, since they have greater aspirations, really kind of push the gas. It'll be interesting to see what the injury reports are moving forward for Gordon after he gets reevaluated, because obviously he's gonna have to get a look. He's gonna have to get looked at by OKC staff first.
Yeah, 100%. But I do like this trade for the Oklahoma City Thunder. Bertans, Micic, Trey Man. As much as I like Trey Man as a backup point guard, he just lost his role in the amount of like young players that OKC has, especially with the emergence of Casey Wallace, who has been a fantastic pickup for them in the draft. So adding Gordon Hayward in exchange for three guys that are not basically not in your rotation is a great risk. And he's an expiring contract. So after this year, he is off your books, whether you want to resign him or not. I see Gordon Hayward as like the perfect second unit leader. Maybe not be your.
That's a good idea.
Maybe not be like your sixth man. Maybe not the guy who's gonna get the most points off the bench, but someone who's gonna be a second unit leader. Where you're gonna have, Cason Wallace, Isaiah Joe, Kenrich Williams. He's gonna be the guy who's gonna steady the ship when they need a bucket in a one-on-one scenario. He's gonna, put you to sleep. He's gonna hit a mid-range jumper. He's just very reliable in that sense. And look, like you mentioned, Josh Giddey, not a great deep-point shooter, not someone who can maybe create offense for himself. You could put Gordon Hayward in closing lineups, and you feel comfortable with him with the ball in his hands at the end of fourth quarters. So him beside J.D. Gilgeous-Alexander just gives him maybe another option there in the fourth quarter alongside him. Chet Holmgren has been fantastic in fourth quarters too, by the way. But it's like all these guys, and then you have kind of that savvy veteran that knows how to get his own shot and can also share the ball with others. I think it's a great pickup for the Oklahoma City Thunder, low risk, high reward type of thing. Because if Gordon Hayward can average even the same as he does this year, like 14, 5, and 5, that is a massive upgrade for your bench. And that place where you actually needed like more stability, which is the 3 position, they got exactly what they needed in Gordon Hayward. And I think that he might prove vital if they want to make a deep playoff run.
Yeah, and I mean, just on the back nine of that too, when you say low risk, high reward, he's also an expiring contract, which also really helps out in terms of looking at the idea that he clears their books and puts them in good position. Because whether people want to talk about it or not, OKC is going to have to rack up cap space because they got some guys coming down the pipeline that they're going to have to pay. So being able to clear some space while also getting a guy like Gordon Hayward works out really well. And there's an aspect of pre-agency here, right? Because he's becoming a free agent this offseason, he is the kind of savvy veteran connector piece that the Oklahoma City Thunder would want to keep around. He's more of a low-key kind of kid. Obviously went to, I don't want to call him kid because obviously he's older, but, comes from Butler in terms of college, the Indiana area. He's a guy that I think if you can kind of sway him to understand and enjoy the Oklahoma City Thunder area and the vibe, he could be a guy that you pick up now that you're able to re-sign for a pretty reasonable price this offseason. And he could be an effective piece moving forward and be, a serviceable, like you said, veteran presence. I think there's a lot of different ways that bringing Gordon Hayward works if he's healthy.
I think he'd just be, you're right. He would be like the perfect veteran for this team. Someone super low key, someone who just knows how to do his job, and someone who has had very much success in the league, the highs and the lows, and I think a lot of people can resonate with that. So I think he is a great pickup there for the Oklahoma City Thunder. We got that trade, and then we got another massive trade because the New York Knicks, man, they are swinging for the fences. They are committing to the season. The Knicks trade Quentin Grimes, Evan Fournier, he's finally off the roster. They trade Archie Diacono, 2 second-round picks, and evil Dante DiVincenzo and Malachi Flynn in exchange for Bojan Bogdanovic and Alec Burks. Jay, we knew that they wanted to get off Grimes. They finally got rid of the Fournier contract, and they bring back 2 very serviceable role players. Veterans here. Alec Burks coming back to the Knicks, by the way, for the 3rd time, and Bojan Bogdanovic. Jay, how do you feel about this trade?
I like this trade for both sides. I love this trade for both sides. And that feels weird talking about the Pistons, boy. But listen, this is the thing that I think is super important to keep in mind. The New York Knicks wants to be effective this season as a postseason team. Something that'll flow under the radar because it came out a little bit later. OG Anunoby is going to be out for at least 3 weeks after undergoing elbow surgery. That's where Bojan Bogdanovic comes in, because many people were wondering if Bojan were acquired by a team like the Knicks, Knicks, would he get any PT under like the Tom Thibodeau system? In situations like this, yes, you are. But you got to look at where this works out, even with OG Anunoby in the lineup. Bojan Bogdanovic can play the 3. He can play the 4. He can come off your bench and be an offensive punch. Alec Burks provides 3-point spacing and another ball handler. Like the Knicks
for them in the 2021 playoffs, by the way. Alec Burks was massive for them.
And another great point, they know what they're getting. That's one of the most important things with the New York Knicks in terms of this acquisition specifically is between Bojan and Alec Burks. Bojan hasn't played for the Knicks, but it's more so Bojan has been Mr. Consistent pretty much most of the time. This year has been a little bit of an outlier in terms of what he's been doing with the Pistons this season, but the Pistons are a dumpster fire this year in ways that can't even compare to last year, for example. So it's a little different. But Bojan Bogdanovic and Alec Burks are both two guys that you know what they bring to the table. They bring 3-point shooting. You get ball handling from both of them. You get the effective pick and roll play from Alec Burks. You get real, not just floor spacing, but shot creation from Bojan Bogdanovic. There is a lot to like here because there is the question now, and this is messed up, and I hope Knicks fans don't get upset with me, but the question is, how savvy is Tom Thibodeau with his lineup construction? Because Tom Thibodeau, and look, he was my coach for the Chicago Bulls back when they were making runs to the Eastern Conference. One thing that I know for sure is Tom Thibodeau has never had weapons on this scale before. I mean, let's go down the list. Jalen Brunson, All-Star. Julius Randle, All-Star. Dante DiVincenzo, Josh Hart. Now Alex Burks, OG, Bojan. Like, let's go down the list, right? Mitch Robb, if he comes back healthy, right?
And like Preston Chua, ever since the trade happened, has been great for them.
Like I don't think Tom Thibodeau has ever had this deep and this talented of a roster ever. So it's going to be interesting for a guy who, for example, OG Anunoby, he was playing 45, 43, 42 minutes, like in back-to-back games. He's a guy, Tom Thibodeau likes to roll with the dudes that brought him to the table. And so when you get an influx of talent like this, you have to ask yourself, is Tom Thibodeau the guy to be able to utilize this roster the way it can be, considering how much talent is here? If Tom can get it through his head that he has so much lineup versatility here, we could see a bunch of different versions of the New York Knicks throughout the rest of this regular season going into the postseason. And I mean, TV, I don't know if we can stamp them as this definitively, but the Knicks might be the deepest team in basketball right now. Like, low key.
They're getting there. They're 100% getting there. This is my message to Tom Thibodeau. This is like one of the best 9-man rotations in basketball. Mm-hmm. One of the best 9-man rotations. You just have to use them. This is all Thibodeau now. You have the players, like you mentioned. You have the players. It's all about trying to use them in ways where you don't have to play guys 38, 39, 40 plus minutes a game, because you have cover now. It's not like back in the day where you had to rely on C.J. Watson's as a guy in the Chicago Bulls, Ronnie Brewers. No, you have like Josh Hart. You have DiVincenzo. Now you have Bogdanovic. I mean, you have guys that can now play regular NBA minutes, and these guys have proven it in the NBA. These are not like some young guys who are like, oh, this guy's a bunch of potential. Let's have these guys get some minutes and develop. No, these guys are proven commodities in the NBA, and Bojan Bogdanovic and Alec Burks. You've had Alec Burks on your team before. You know how effective he could be for you. Bogdanovic is a 10-year veteran. This swing from the New York Knicks is absolutely perfect. They got off someone who was already frustrated with their team. They got off a bad contract. 2 point guards who had no future with the New York Knicks in 2 seconds. They didn't even have to give up a first-round pick for any of this. Perfect trade for the New York Knicks. A trade which signals that they realize that we need to take advantage of this year. Jalen Brunson is playing at an all-NBA level, and we want him to have the best chance around him to do the best to play well. We made the trade for OG Anunoby. We got some cover now at the center position with Hartenstein, Achua. Maybe they can work the buyout market to get another center involved. But besides that, we've basically covered our asses on all fronts. This is the year that we need to take advantage of this. And this is the trade to do it. I think it's a fantastic trade for them. And look, man, this Knicks team, if the potential can be reached, this is a potential conference finals team. I truly believe that.
I feel, and I want to go to the Pistons side of this just because I don't want this to lean so much on the Knicks, because I like this for both sides. Obviously, Evan Fournier is expiring money. That's been his main asset ploy, probably for like
selling point, basically. His big
probably is his main selling point for probably like the last year and a half or so, right? Obviously Malachi Flynn, Wright, and Archie Diacono, they're throw-ins. Quentin Grimes is the guy here, though. Quentin Grimes is the guy here. He is a really good two-way player that just got caught in the shuffle. Like, that's just what it was. Quentin Grimes is a really solid two-way player that was really effective for the New York Knicks at the time that he was on the floor. But because of the influx of talent that the New York Knicks have, specifically when they acquired Dante DiVincenzo and Josh Hart, he got knocked down the pecking order. And that's just an understanding of the fact that those guys, again, we got to think about Tom Thibodeau here, Josh Hart, Dante DiVincenzo, known commodities, Quentin Grimes, still a developmental project. As a two-way player, he goes to the Pistons now. He can play next to Cade Cunningham. He can play next to Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey. He can play next to Jaden Ivey by himself. He is going to get the chance to develop more on-ball reps while also being able to provide a two-way ability that makes him playable. This is part of what the Pistons were trying to sell us being Pistons fans, if you're one of those people that falls into that category. This is what they were trying to sell Pistons fans at the beginning of the year when they were talking about playing Killian Hayes so much, who actually got released today. But that's part of the ploy that they were pushing, was we want to focus more on two-way play. Now, obviously, Pistons fans were pissed because it led to Jaden Ivey coming off the bench and getting reduced minutes and a bunch of crazy stuff that just didn't make a whole lot of sense. But Quentin Grimes is the kind of guy that can be brought in, be a two-way guy at the guard position, be effective next to your main player, your main guy, who's Cade Cunningham, next to one of your main dudes in Jaden Ivey. Be a dude who you maybe can put the ball in his hands and operate in pick and rolls next to Jalen Duren. This is the start of something where you get a guy who's multifaceted enough where if you really develop him out, he can be a real cog piece, an OG Anunoby-esque piece, dare I say, at the guard position for the Pistons, who need more blue chip players. Like, that's the main thing for the Pistons. They need more blue chip guys like the Thompson twin, like Cade, like Jaden, like Jalen Duren. They need to just get more dudes where the talent tells you, like, yo, this guy can play NBA basketball.
Yeah, they just need some guys on the periphery because they have their on-ball guys. They have their stars that they want to build around, and Jaden Ivey and Cade Cunningham, whoever they get from this year's draft, Jalen Duren. You just need some guys to do a bit of the dirty work, the ones who will play hard in the defensive end, who are able to shoot threes. And Quentin Grimes has shown that he's able to do that last year in the playoffs. He was a big part of that Knicks playoff run last year. So you know what's in him, but you have to, like, make sure that he gets the rightful minutes, that Monty Williams actually puts him in the rotation. I mean, it took him too long to realize that Jaden Ivey should be starting anyway. So hopefully he understands what he has in Quentin Grimes. Sure, he's not having the best year so far, but you know what he's capable of, and he's still a super young talent. Mm-hmm. And I think that this is like the type of trade where if you're trading away two veteran assets, you want to get some sort of pick equity, which they got, and they got a guy who they can play long-term alongside their stars in Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren. So I think this is a great trade for both sides. I think the Knicks end up winning more because of the high aspirations that they have. But I think that the Pistons got something there in Quentin Grimes, especially if they can, like, really fit him in with the rest of the guys in the roster. I like the trade definitely for them as well. Moving on to the next trade. This trade, the way it's developing even more, makes it even more funnier. But the Raptors make another trade, the second trade of the day, and they trade away Dennis Schroeder and Thaddeus Young, who was released by the Brooklyn Nets, in exchange for Spencer Dinwiddie, who was released by the Toronto Raptors. So basically this trade was Dennis Schroeder, go to the Nets. That's what the trade was. So that's what ended up happening. Jay, quick thoughts on this trade?
Hey man, I'm not sure. I'm assuming that the Raps were trying to save some bread, and Dennis Schroeder sounded a little disgruntled after Emmanuel quickly got brought in about his overall playing time and things of that nature. Obviously, you don't want to upset the apple cart when you have a bunch of young talent on the roster. We've seen that with the Raptors in particular, that when infighting takes place, it can really start to deteriorate the roster from the inside out, and it causes problems that you don't necessarily need. And the main thing is you don't need to be alienating your all-star in Scotty Barnes by making it feel as though the roster that they're building around him is not up to snuff, or it doesn't play to what the other players' individual agendas are. Guys like Emmanuel Quickly, R.J. Barrett, Scotty Barnes, they need to play. They need to play together. Dennis Schroeder upsets the apple cart a little bit on that. I don't think Spencer Dinwiddie was going to bring very much to them. That was the most interesting part about it. But he's going to be a guy that on the buyout market could get some interesting burns. So, look, this might not be a dub for either team because I don't really know what Dennis Schroeder brings to the Nets. They've been underwhelming defensively this year. Maybe he helps bring some punch there. But I think this is a big win for the buyout market, if anything, because Spencer Dinwiddie on a team that he might actually care about.
Yeah.
Hey, he might, he might come out and ball out and give you 15 to 20 minutes that you didn't know you needed in a series. So somebody's going to get a good player and Spencer Dinwiddie, who hopefully will be motivated to play some big time basketball.
Yeah, no, 100%. And this was 100% a cap saving move. Dennis Schroeder had another year on his contract worth $13 million next year, and the Raptors didn't want to pay it. So what do? They trade for Spencer Dinwiddie, whose contract is up this year. Now, The reason the Raptors released him was because he has like 2 or 3 games away from getting his bonus for playing enough games in the season. Mm-hmm. And the Raptors wasn't going to pay an extra $2 million for that, so they just released him. So that's what ended up happening. Thaddeus Young was including this trade too, which absolutely, honestly, I've grown an attachment to Thaddeus Young because in the meantime, where we didn't have Jakob Poeltl at center and we were basically playing 6'8" Thaddeus Young there, he did his damn thing, bro. You know, from his time with the Chicago Bulls, Thaddeus Johnson is a real thing, and he played his damn best at that center position for someone who's like one of the oldest players in the league. He had a massive impact on that team, and I'm sad that we ended up trading him. Honestly, being released is probably the best chance for him to be on a winning situation. So hopefully someone does pick him up because he definitely still has some gas left in the tank. He is a good player. But people who are mad about Spencer Dinwiddie getting released, I've seen some people get mad at it because like, what's the point of this trade? Yada yada yada. Spencer Dinwiddie's having the worst season of his career, guys. He's like under 40% from three, almost basically 30% from the 3-point line. He was just not playing for the Nets well whatsoever, and they traded him away. He was clearly not going to be really extended or anything. So maybe he could find some new life in another team, whether it's the Lakers, who didn't do anything this trade deadline, or any other team that's looking for another guard. So probably the best situation for him is being put in the buyout market, which he has right now. And the Nets, they still want to be competitive. They don't have their draft picks, so there's no really incentive for them to be bad. So I guess you get a decent backup point guard there in Dennis Schroeder, who was pretty solid for the Raptors, but there's no need to keep him for another year, especially since we have to extend Scotty very soon, since we have to extend quickly very soon. So it's good to cut some money. So sad that we had to trade Dennis as well because he was actually a solid player for us. But the Nets, they did this trade just so they can have another playable player again. So I guess each team got exactly what they wanted. Moving on to the next trade, the Dallas Mavericks, one of the biggest aggressors in this trade deadline, started off by trading away Richaun Holmes in the 2024 Thunder first-round pick in exchange for the Wizards' Daniel Gafford. Jay, you're very familiar with Daniel Gafford, and honestly, he's had a pretty good season here so far. How do you like this trade for the Mavs?
This is my guy. Come on now. Wizards, Bulls, this is my guy right here. And I think the main thing right here with this is just the understanding that having a young center, right? Derek Lively II has been phenomenal this year in the time that he's been on the floor. Don't want to undermine that at any juncture. But having a young center be your main focal in the front court in a postseason where this team, the Dallas Mavericks, have real championship aspirations with the tandem of Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, that's a lot to put on a young guy. There's a lot of people already putting out a lot of buzz for could this be a future DPOY candidate and things of that nature. He is a big-time shot blocker and rim defender. Yeah. Like, I want to give all of the credit to Derek Lively. He has played up to where his draft stock was in terms of what he brings to the table, and he's one of the few guys that we get to speak about where we say that they bring a real effectiveness or a real translatable skill out the gate as a rookie to a team where it matters, right? So I don't want to undermine Derek Lively's season by any marks, but having a young guy as your lead dude in the front court at the center position against some of the better centers in the NBA, because boy, the Western Conference got themselves some big men. That is a tough thing to ask. Daniel Gafford gives you a lot of the lob threat stuff, big time rebounder. You'll never forget it when it comes to Daniel Gafford getting a board. And This bolsters their front court phenomenally because it gives them another lob threat. It gives them another big, burly pick and roll body for setting screens and creating space for their perimeter guys. There's a lot that comes out of Daniel Gafford playing on a team like this, because the other thing is, name a better setup man for a pick and roll center than Luka Doncic for Daniel Gafford. I mean, there's not too many guys that Daniel Gafford has had as point guards or guards in general that have had the kind of setup ability and gravity that Luka Doncic has. That means a lot for a guy like Daniel Gafford, who can almost play like an old school Houston Clint Capella role on this kind of team. And that's something where this dude could mess around and walk into 12 and 10 nightly, just off of the fact that he's a savvy dude that's very dangerous around the basket and a little bit more athletic than some people give him credit for, which definitely makes him dangerous around the rim on both sides of the floor.
Yes. And he doesn't take away anything from the guards, because the guards are the ones going to be putting up shots. Mm-hmm. Kyrie, Luka, Tim Hardaway Jr. Those guys are going to be put up shots. He doesn't. He's going to be the garbage man down low. And now you have two of those guys now. And honestly, the happiest thing I've seen about the Dallas Mavericks fans on social media is that this dilutes the Dwight Powell minutes. They've had to deal with Dwight Powell at center for years, and now they have Derek Lively and Daniel Gafford. Those Dwight Powell minutes are going bye-bye. So I think this is a great trade for them. We talked about it. A 2024 first-round pick from the Thunder is in the late 20s. And this is already a bad draft anyway, so it doesn't have as much value as it would on the other years. Gafford is like the perfect center to put there. Sure, Derek Lively could still start, but you could just honestly just put the minutes between these two, and you'll have a good mix of those guys. Mm. The Mavs made some big deals today, and I think that this one was one that was definitely needed. I know Andre Drummond was in the mix for someone that they were going to trade for, but we'll talk about the Bulls later. But Daniel Gafford, it's still a great player. He was a starter in the Wizards for a while now, and now he's going to play some meaningful basketball there at the Dallas Mavericks. You love to see it. I think it's a great pickup for the Dallas Mavericks, and he gives them exactly what they need. Moving on, this is going to be going really quickly. The Pistons trade a 2028 second-round pick for Daniel House, who got waived, and a 2024 New York Knicks second-round pick. Thoughts? No, we move on. Yeah. Next up, Dallas Mavericks. This is the other trade they pulled off, and this one, another pretty big one for them. The Mavs acquire P.J. Washington and 2 second-round picks in exchange for Grant Williams, Seth Curry, and a 2027 top 2 protected pick. Jay, now this one is where we're going to have some thoughts. Jay, what do you think about this trade?
Bro, could you tell that Dallas was just sick of Dwight Powell and Maxi Kleber? Like,
right?
Boy, oh boy, you could tell. At this deadline, they were just trying to make sure that they got their front court up and ready to go, because they wanted to this is their version of cleaning house without telling you to your face, because this right here it's clear as day. They just signed Grant Williams. They pretty much outbid everybody. They kind of got Grant Williams for a steal if you actually look back at the actual acquisition itself in that signing trade. But PJ Washington, I mean, he gives you a lot of what Grant Williams also does, but I think he does it in a bigger and much more effective way. He's another guy that I think you could put around the rim. You could put him at the 4, which is big for this team because he can play next to Daniel Gafford. He can play next to Kleber if you really want to position yourself that way. You can play next to Dwight Powell if you really want to position that way. This is a move where you get a very versatile 4 who can stretch the floor. I know he's shooting 32% from 3 this year, but this is a guy who his first year out, 37%, second year, 38, nearly 39% from 3, third year, 36.5%. These last 2 years have been downticks, but he can hit the 3 ball. We have to remember these last 2 years in particular, LaMelo Ball was not on the floor for the Charlotte Hornets for good stretches of the NBA season on both accounts, this year and last year. When PJ Washington has a legit setup man to help with creating 3-point opportunities for him, he's a knockdown 3-point shooter. That's big for a Dallas Mavericks team who, again, I just mentioned this with Daniel Gafford as a pick and roll threat. What about a pick and pop threat in terms of PJ Washington being able to pop out and flare to both either the corner, the top of the key, and Luka Doncic delivering big time passes? This is something where now, with 2 trades, you have fortified your front court and you have developed an inside-out game with 2 different big men. You've created a pick-and-pop-oriented offense with P.J. Washington and a pick-and-roll-oriented offense with Daniel Gafford. You get yourself two guys who can defend the rim. TV, they're basically getting 48 minutes where there's not going to be a shot blocker on the floor. Like, there's for 48 minutes between Derek Lively, Daniel Gafford, and PJ Washington, somebody is going to put their hand up and make sure that they're one of the best rim defenders in the NBA. Like, this is going to be one of those things where I think they understand, especially because this was a team, like you mentioned, that was in the running for like an Andre Drummond. They understand they're going to need to get Burley in the front court. They're not going to necessarily do it with real size, but they're going to do it by committee. And I think these two trades together, the Dallas Mavericks got really good today. They got really good today.
Yeah, they got really good. I mean, it just shows that the Grant Williams experiment didn't work out. If you remember from our preseason show, I said that he was the most underrated signing of the offseason, and he turned out to be one of the Mavs' worst acquisitions. Mavs fans absolutely hate Grant Williams at this point. So the fact that he got rid of him was good. Sucks that Seth Curry had to leave again. Knowing him, he's like the Alec Brooks of the Dallas Mavericks, where he's going to return to them a year later. But good thing for the Hornets, they got like a top 2 protected pick. So if the Dallas Mavericks somehow, some way are bad in 2027, they could get a really juicy pick over there. But in terms of the Mavs, what they got in PJ Washington, I like exactly. You have the inside-out game. You have the pick-and-roll threat. You have just a lot more versatility in the front court. And now you have depth. Maxi Kleber could still play some minutes. He's proven that he could be solid in the playoffs. Standing with Dwight Powell. I mean, he's been a member of this team for 10 years. How did he last 10 years, basically 10 years here in Dallas? I don't know. But he's been here for basically 10 years. So Dallas Mavericks improved exactly where they need to in the front court, and it doesn't take anything away from Luka Doncic, Tim Hardaway Jr., who's having a great season, and Kyrie Irving. This is the lineup that you would want around Luka. You have the 5-out prospect, you have the pick and roll threat, the lob threat. This is where the Mavericks are like, you know what? This might be the best chance we have because Luka's playing out of his mind this season. So we need to take advantage at any way possible to take advantage of Luka Doncic's prime, and this is the way to do it. Was a top 2 protected first round pick a lot? Some people might say so, but if you're going to get someone like PJ Washington, who was a very solid player in this league, who's possibly going to be a starting caliber player for the Dallas Mavericks, you're going to have to pay something, and this is what you had to end up paying. I think it's a good trade for them. The Hornets got what they needed in terms of a pick and also just someone who can kind of grow with LaMelo Ball. Guessing Grant Williams, he's only 25 years old. So I think both teams got exactly what they needed, but the Mavs, as in general, really improved their team after this deadline.
I think the Mavericks are one of the better teams coming out of this deadline with what they've done. It's stuff that, if, like I said, they're the kind of names you would hope would move. For example, Kyle Kuzma was a guy that was heavily associated with the Dallas Mavericks. Jeremy Grant as well was another guy heavily associated with the Dallas Mavericks. Yes, they didn't acquire those guys, but I think they did something a tier below that, but in tandem in a way that I think is equivalent, if not potentially a little better long term than either one of those potential acquisitions, whether it be Jeremy Grant or Kuzma. So it's interesting. Not too many big names besides probably Bojan moved today, but Dallas is one of those teams that, despite that, was able to upgrade very heavily with guys that fit exactly what it is that they need to be getting better at.
100%. I like this trade for them, and just this whole day in general. They improved exactly where they needed. You love to see it if you're a Dallas Mavericks fan.
Yeah.
All right. These next trades shouldn't be too long, but let's talk about it. This one, there's a 3-team trade today, actually, Jay. The Phoenix Suns acquired David Roddy and Royce O'Neal. They give away a pick swap to the Grizzlies, that's where David Roddy is from. They also ship up Yuta Watanabe and Chimezie Metu. The Nets get 3 second-round picks, Keita Bates-Diop, and Jordan Goodwin. Quick thoughts on this trade?
Stinky trade. 3-team trade, and it's this. Like, come on, man. Who even is the best player in this trade? Royce O'Neal?
Yeah. Look, honestly, this is what I have to say for this trade. You talked about the Grizzlies like not caring about front court depth. David Roddy's a solid player. David Roddy is solid. What are they doing giving him for a pick?
What is happening? Like,
what is happening there in Memphis? I don't know what's going on.
LeBron told the Memphis Grizzlies, I don't understand. LeBron told the Memphis Grizzlies ever since that series, the Memphis Grizzlies have lost all competency. They're getting injured left and right. They're having on and off the court issues. They can't seem to buy a win to save their life. They gotten a lot better as a recent. But this, and now in terms of the trade market, they don't know what they're doing. Like, I don't know what deliriousness was created by losing that series to the Lakers, but it's like they came out of that series and just decided that they just lost all understanding of a pathway. This was a team that once upon a time we thought they had the scratch to go make a big trade because of all the young assets they had. Where the big trade at? Where the big trade at?
I don't know, man. But one more thing about this trade before we move on. James Jones means it when he said he don't give a fuck about draft picks, bro.
No cap.
No
cap. Pick swap with Phoenix, with the Grizzlies. What? First of all, why would the Grizzlies even want a pick swap with you right now? I'm keeping it being, but it's the mere fact. And then the second round pick aspect.
Three second rounders for Royce O'Neal and David Roddy. Sure, okay. I love this for the Suns because they actually get some good role players. I think that's gonna actually be effective for them in the long run. But James Jones, man, y'all don't care about your future. If a scout comes up to you and it's like, hey, we like this guy from Duke. Oh, can he be traded for Tyus Jones? That's going to be the next question from James.
For real, bro. My man's James Jones put second round picks in the middle of the table like you losing in Uno, bro. Like, this is brutal.
Yeah, I don't know what's left in the Suns. Like, they're literally the anti-OKC. What is left in their and what is left in their cupboard, bro? I don't know what's left. They might scrounge up a 20-30 second round pick next year as their only trade asset. Who knows? But man, the Suns, yes, they get better, but where the heck are like their trades are scattered across, their picks are scattered across the league, bro. I don't understand, bro. Let's move on. Patrick Beverley, 5th team in 2 years. This is his 5th team in 2 years. Traded to the Milwaukee Bucks in exchange for Cameron Payne and the 2027 second round pick. Quick thoughts.
They needed defense, bro. And Pat Bev brings that. I mean, that's the only thing I can think of. Other than that, I mean, he could be a 2-guard next to Damian Lillard in certain closing lineups. Like, there's Pat Bev is gonna be effective. There's gonna be a 15-20 minute stretch across a series or two where Pat Bev is gonna give you something you didn't know you needed until it happens. Like, that's just how it's built in. You know what I mean? Pat Bev is that kind of player. And he is like the epitome of that kind of sign up where you get a guy who, you know, the grit, the intangibles, all of those things are going to come to a team like the Milwaukee Bucks who are looking to win a championship this year. Like, let's not forget, like, they have Dame Lillard and Giannis Antetokounmpo. They're not playing. They're not playing around. So is Pat Beverley this necessary, like, needle mover for them? I don't think so. But does he give them a defensive, does he give him some kind of defensive outburst that kind of like assists in a way? Yeah. Plus, I mean, I don't want to gas this too much, but like Doc Rivers knows how to use him clearly. We saw that in the underrated year for the LA Clippers where they didn't have a single superstar. I don't want to gas that too much because I really don't even know how I feel about this whole Doc Rivers head coaching thing with the Bucks just yet. But Pat Bev, he's going to bring something to the Bucks that they're going to reap the benefits of at a later date. I don't think it's going to be right now, but I mean, you get off campaign in the second round for a guy who you could arguably say could start for you, or at least close games.
Yeah, you trade offense for defense. That's basically what this trade is for the Milwaukee Bucks. The 76ers saw a chance that they can get a second round pick and a minimal downgrade at point guard, and they're like, you know what, we'll just take it. Pat Bev has said some things about Dame Lillard and Giannis Antetokounmpo on his podcast, so he's gonna have to fix up. They're gonna have to fix up those relations before they get on the court, bro. He's gonna have to make stuff up. But yeah, good trade for the Bucks. They need some defense. Pat Bev's gonna give you that. Next topic: Joe Harris and Killian Hayes get released. I just put L beside it. I just put L beside Killian Hayes, former 7th overall pick in the 2020 draft. Remember that Monty Williams started him over 30 games this year. Just remember that, guys. And now he's released. You know, like we can't trade you for anything. You go and find yourself a trade.
TV. I have to tell you something I've been thinking about all day since seeing this release.
Yeah.
Outside of every trade we've seen from the Detroit Pistons, and they were pretty active today, this might be the best representation of competency.
The fact that this man played 3 years there and got over 25 minutes a game is an absolute robbery. They've done it. They've finally let go of it. First, Dennis Schroeder gets away from the Raptors, who was like Darko's guy, and he finally can play the young guys. And now the Pistons can get rid of Killian Hayes so they can play the actual good players. So good for them. Next up, the Pacers, they got rid of a 3-point shooter. They gain a 3-point shooter. They get Doug McDermott. They trade away Marcus Morris, who ended up being released, and a 2029 Clipper second-round pick. We move. They get shooting back. They basically, at least that covers up for Bradley Beal. Marcus Morris went from he went from getting the keys to the city in Philadelphia to getting traded twice in a day and also getting released. What a month for Marcus Morris. Next up, the Bucks trade away Robin Lopez for cash considerations from the Sacramento Kings. We move on.
It says that what the Bucks receive is TBD. I've never even seen that before. Like, bro, that's what really got. Like, the funniest part about this trade is, and Robin Lopez is supposed to get released. So
what was the point of this?
So yeah, it says Kings reportedly expected to waive Lopez. So this is basically cash considerations for TBD. This is the equivalent of putting a pink slip on somebody's wall and running away. Like,
no, this is money laundering. This is what it is. This is money laundering, bro.
A finesse subpoena at its finest. Hey, bro, we just gotta bring you to the table and see what you got in mind. Like, what? What's going on here, man? This is if paying under the table was a trade, this is the one.
This is 100% the one. Look, the Bucks are fine giving away a Lopez twin, but Thanasis seems to be untouchable.
Oh, brother,
we learned here, bro.
TV, you're gonna get us canceled. Leave Thanasis alone. Leave Thanasis alone.
Oh, he already gets enough slander. We love our boy Thanasis over here. Moving on. Jaden Springer gets traded from the 76ers to the Boston Celtics for a second-round pick.
He's not playing for the Celtics.
We move on. We move on. The Celtics trade Delano Banton to the Portland Trailblazers for a heavily protected second-round pick.
I don't know, man. Like, could Delano Banton play for Portland?
I feel bad for bro. He's a Toronto native. He's getting passed around now. I hope he gets some time, but man, that's tough. By the way, this reminded me when Dwayne Wade got traded from the Cavs to the Heat, and he got traded for a top 55 protected second round pick. Now, this is what reminded me of. So when it's all heavily protected, I just started laughing because it reminded me of the Dwayne Wade trade. But yeah, hopefully Delano lands on his feet, bro. Hopefully Delano lands on his feet. And the final trade of the day, Corey Joseph gets traded from the Golden State Warriors to the Indiana Pacers for a second round pick. Corey Joseph is now released.
Yeah. So cash considerations for a second rounder. Welcome to the table. Money laundering again at its finest.
I love how I was waiting for like Woj and Shams to say something in the final minutes of the trade deadline, and it turned out it was just all money laundering. That's all it was. They literally just revealed a crime. They revealed a crime.
Just promoting cartel activities for the last hour of trade deadline.
Holy shoot. But yeah, that's the end of the trade deadline. Let us know down below what you guys think about these trades, and if any of these teams either won or lost. Let us know down below what you guys think. Now we're gonna go into these last two questions because there's some trades that we expected to be made but didn't end up being made. So we're gonna spend these last couple minutes talking about these questions. Jay, I'm gonna throw this question over to you. Who are you surprised didn't get traded or didn't make a move?
I am surprised that Tyus Jones didn't get moved. I know that's my dog, so I'm going to be a little biased here, but I'm surprised Tyus Jones wasn't moved. I mean, there was a real point guard market out here. You know what I'm saying? The Lakers need a point guard. Obviously, Spencer Dinwiddie might be one of the first guys that comes up for them. I mentioned it beforehand with Minnesota. They went for a little bit of a low ball with going for Monte Morris instead. The San Antonio Spurs, where he could be reunited with his brother in terms of playing with them, being an effective starting point guard, have a real chance to start and play next to a guy like Victor Wembanyama and finally bring some like consistency to the point guard position. There was a lot of different teams where the point guard position got brought up and Tyus Jones didn't get moved. I found that really interesting. The team that I'm obviously pissed off about is the Chicago Bulls. TV, we talked about this before the podcast started. I'm going to try my best not to go too deep onto this because I'm actually going to do a better job once I'm like not seething about talking about this on the Hit Your Free Throws TikTok page. So stay tuned for the TikTok page. Rant coming soon. This is my mini version of the rant, though. The Bulls have not made a significant trade of any kind in 3 years in terms of what they've done at the trade deadline. They have not made a move at the trade deadline in 3 years. The last trade that they have actually done as of late is a 2 second rounders for 1 second rounder that became Julian Phillips. That's about it. Other than that, the Chicago Bulls have rested on their laurels of they got Nikola Vucevic the first year that Karnisovas showed up, bringing in DeMar DeRozan. Cool, whatever. I'm glad they were able to make that trade for Lonzo Ball in the offseason when it happened. Look, this is not this is one of those things with the Chicago Bulls where we need to understand that this is not about putting butts in seats. This is not about wanting to be competent so that you can keep the cash flow coming. Chicago Bulls fans are Chicago Bulls fans. We're going to watch. We're going to show up. If you check every single year, the United Center, top 5 in attendance every single year. By hook or crook, we can be 22-60 or 60-22. It does not matter. The problem is this team at the top is always bad. It doesn't matter whether it's Garpax or this regime we have now with Karnisovas. They told us, shout out to Kenny Beecham. He talked about this when he had his little rant, and I'm going to try not to mirror his too much because I want to give my own personal feelings on this as somebody who's a Bulls fan from a distance as opposed from him being a Bulls fan much more up close. But here's the thing about the Chicago Bulls. They are a team that has told us time and time again, specifically at the beginning of this new regime, mediocrity is something that they do not stand for. TV, outside of the Atlanta Hawks, who could not seem to buy a chance past 500 last year, who has been more mediocre in the last 4 to 5 years than the Bulls? Like, that's the part that's bugging me out is this team is built off selling lies lately. And I'm not a fan of it. And this is the thing that gets tough. Alex Caruso turned into an untouchable. Don't get it. Patrick Williams didn't even get discussed, despite the fact that I like him as a young asset. DeMar DeRozan, expiring contract this offseason.
Quickly, he said there's reports into the Bulls want to extend him long term.
And here's the problem. They couldn't get a negotiation handled with him in the offseason. He said no to the number. So now you basically just signed up to overpay DeMar DeRozan until he's 37 years old. Good job, Bulls. You did the same thing you did with Vooch, with a player who's probably going to be just as ineffective down the line as Vucevic in the same amount of time. There you go. You just signed yourself up for a long-term problem of old dudes taking up time and overall development from a Bulls team that has not found a way to be bad enough to get the guy into the building. I love Kobe White. Definitely should be at the top of most improved player this year. That's my personal opinion. Other than that, name the next blue chip prospect on the Bulls. There you go. There you go. If I run up to anybody that's not a Bulls fan, put guns to the head and say, name 5 Bulls players that aren't in the starting 5, you'll struggle.
Yes.
You'll struggle. And it's because this team is struggling to be able to put things together. Kenny said something interesting on his video. He said this regime may be worse than Garpax. He said the reason why they might be worse than Garpax is because at least the Garpax regime could draft well. That one hit different. I ain't gonna lie. Because when he said that, it made me realize, damn, we ain't even really been hitting good on the draft picks over the last 3 seasons to make up for the fact that we spending all this dumbass money on players that aren't going to last long for us being a real competent roster. So somehow that's the short version. You'll get the longer version on TikTok tomorrow. But the Bulls are easily the most disappointing team to me. I'm not going to lie.
Funnily, I thought that this was the year the Bulls were going to do it. The Raptors finally stepped out of it and made some moves. I thought maybe this is the year Chicago does it, but Chicago's continues wants to want to be mid and get eliminated in the play-in tournament. That's what the Bulls have showed us today. I feel bad for y'all. Really feel bad for you. But for me, I guess the most surprised person that didn't get traded, Bruce Brown. I thought that we traded him specifically to get traded. But out of all the players that got traded from Toronto, he didn't. Apparently, he's going to get traded in the offseason. They're going to pick up the team option and see what moves they can make in the offseason, which honestly makes a lot of sense to me. So I like that. So I don't mind waiting out for longer. But I'm just surprised he didn't get traded. Like, there were so many rumors of the Lakers, the 76ers, any other teams looking towards Bruce Brown, the New York Knicks, and it didn't happen. So he's going to remain around for the remainder of the season. So I'm not mad about it. I'm just surprised he's still here.
TV, can we bring up DeJounte, or does he fall more into this next category?
The best non-move, I guess so, because I'll start off with this one, because my next one was like the best non-move.
Yeah.
I would say it's DeJounte Murray, and here's the reason why. It's not because I think like he would be the perfect backcourt mate to Trae Young or anything.
Mm-hmm.
Why force yourself into a trade deadline?
There
you have
you
an
go.
entire off season, and it's not like he's like expiring or anything. He has like multiple years on the deal.
I think it's 3 or 4 more years. I think he has at least 3.
Yeah. Why wait? Like, why force yourself to trade him in the trade deadline? People are forcing you this entire month, this entire like last 30 days to say, oh, we have to trade DeJounte Murray now. Lakers, make the move. Whatever team, Spurs, make the move. The Hawks, you have the power here. He has years left on his deal. Just wait till the offseason. Clear and easy. That's the best non-move. They didn't get pressured by any of the trade rumors. They didn't get pressured by any of these teams trying to offer them what seems to be not much. And now they're gonna have a better opportunity of getting the most out of him in the offseason. They did the right move, and it's probably the best non-move of the trade deadline.
That's why I asked the question of whether or not it qualified for this category or the last one, is because I think DeJounte Murray was the most surprising in terms of him not being moved, because his name was the main one that kept coming up as probably the biggest fish on the market in terms of being discussed. But at the same time, I'm right there with you. Why in the hell, if I'm the Atlanta Hawks, would I trade him right now for basically a box of cereal? And there's literally no reason, no incentive. I mean, nobody's shown any sign of real disgruntledness. I mean, I know there was the Trae Young comments about him not being too against the idea of playing next to Victor Wembanyama, but how many point guards don't want to play next to Victor Wembanyama? Like, what the heck? Like, that's not. I don't think that's a slight. That's just if I got sent to the Spurs, hey, me and Victor would kill. Yeah, they would kill. Like, I mean, it's not rocket science. You play 2K, find out. Like, you know what I mean? So, I mean, I'm right there with you. I think it was one of those things where I think for the Hawks, way to stay the ship. Another team that I think it was really smart for is the Los Angeles Lakers, though. I think if you're not going to get DeJounte, don't be a dummy. You only have 1 first-round pick to trade this year during this season. The minute the offseason hits, you have 3. You have 3 that are eligible to be traded. Now, I saw some goofy news that said that they feel very confident that they can make a run at Donovan Mitchell next season. I don't know whose intel is that. I don't know whose intel they're giving out for that one. I'm sure maybe Donovan Mitchell's camp is pushing something. I don't know why he would. The Cleveland Cavaliers are 15-1 in their last 16 games.
Yeah.
I don't think he's too worried about playing with the Lakers right now. But if they think they have a shot, by all means. I mean, at the same time, they also have 3 first-round picks that can be used for a sign-and trade. And we know that this offseason in particular, it's a lot of pretty solid free agents out there. We all think they're going to probably re-sign with their teams, right? Especially like a guy like Paul George, for example, who's probably like the most notable name outside of LeBron James if he doesn't pick up his option. Yeah. But let's be real. Like, yeah, if you're not going to get DeJounte Murray for 1 pick now, I mean, why trade for a middling, random role player when you could maybe throw some money at like a Spencer Dinwiddie off the buyout market and go after him that way and get a serviceable point guard? Or, hey, maybe they just got swayed by the D-Lo effect and they just saved themselves. I don't know. But I like that the Lakers actually didn't jump out of their body on this one, because it's the easy thing to do, especially when you got LeBron James posting hourglass emojis. Yeah. But I do think that this is the best way for their team to actually get better.
A no trade is better than a bad trade. That's what you want to say there with the Los Angeles Lakers. And honestly, a lot of their issues don't stem from the actual lineup they have right now. It's coaching. We talked about rotations. We talked about a whole lot of stuff regarding Darvin Ham a few weeks ago. And I think those issues still stand. I think the roster is fine. I think that it's starting to finally find its footing, especially with the way D'Lo is playing right now. But I think you just ride the ship. You have this roster right now. You've had half a season with them. Try to see if they can finish it out. If you could keep LeBron James and Anthony Davis healthy, you'll have a chance. Mm-hmm. You'll always have a chance with those guys on your roster. So I agree with that. I think they did a good job not forcing any other trades if the DeJounte Murray trade wasn't available. And they still got a lot of talented guys on that roster. Maybe Spencer Dinwiddie could come into the mix to really bolster up that guard position as well. Reunite the 2019 Nets. Why don't you? But yeah, I like the idea too that they didn't make any trades either to close out, especially when there was a lot of pressure for them to do so. 100%. Jay, any other thoughts on this trade deadline before we sign out?
Not as active as we would have hoped, but I think a lot of people were warning us a couple of days back that it was going to be a much quieter trade deadline than we would have wanted it to be. A lot of names I would have loved to see move. Jeremy Grant, I thought would have been dope on Dallas. Kyle Kuzma with the Kings. As much as I don't love the fit, I do think them getting another scoring punch would just kind of feed into the fact that they want to score 150 a night. Anthony Simons, I saw a lot of people with the idea of an Anthony Simons to either San Antonio or my favorite would have been him on the Orlando Magic. My boy Tyus not moving, I hate that because I feel like if he were on a better team, it would be a really dope pickup for somebody who's looking for steady point guard play. Even the Orlando Magic, I think, could have been a really dope team to get a Tyus Jones because he's just a real floor raiser. I think personally, like I said, I think that he brings a certain level of stability and effectiveness as a pick and roll threat, as a ball handler, as a decision maker. There's just a handful of guys that didn't move that I thought would be interesting on other teams. Shout out to my boy Harrison Barnes, who continues to be the Tobias Harris of the trade deadline, where he's always brought up, but he's always safe when it's over. And then shout out to D'Lo, who played himself out of being on the trade block. I think that's dope. He brought the ice in his veins back, and over the last 5 to 7 games, he's really balled out. And I don't necessarily know if it'll translate come to postseason because we know how guys do when they feel like their name is being brought up a lot. But I'm glad that D'Lo was able to kind of solidify himself. I think he's a good point guard for the Lakers at the end of the day, but I think he just was not playing up to his potential. And over the last couple of games, he's really kind of come more into himself, and I hope that plays out for the Lakers, despite the fact that I ain't no Lakers fan or nothing.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I guess personally, just for myself, real quick before we sign out, just the Raptors, I wish they made some more trades. Trade away Gary Trent Jr., the Bruce Brown trade, I wish there was something there, but I guess not. But besides that, yeah, not a crazy trade deadline, but there's definitely some difference makers that could definitely change the NBA up for sure. But Jay, we've reached the NBA trade deadline special. Thank you guys for watching. A lot of trades again too, but Jay, what do you have to tell these people before we sign out?
Hey man, this is the big part of the season. I'm going to put it this way. The NBA All-Star Weekend is coming up right around the corner. There's a lot of changes coming around to the Hit Your Free Throws podcast in terms of our presentation, in terms of what we want to do content-wise. There is a lot that me and TV have to discuss, a lot that we have already discussed. But we want to come out of this All-Star Weekend a much better podcast. Hopefully, we've been a 10 out of 10 5-stars podcast for you guys. Please do that in the Apple Podcasts and Spotify's for us. We'd really appreciate that. Hopefully, we've been a 10 out of 10 or a 5-star for you so far. We really want to go above and beyond in the second half of the season as we make a push to the playoffs. So expect a lot of different content. I mentioned to you guys already, I'm dropping at least a 5-minute rant, strong 5-minute rant on the Chicago Bulls on the TikTok page tomorrow. You can only catch that on the TikTok and the Instagram. And TV has been covering the daylights out of the Toronto Raptors on his page, and has been really staying on top of NBA news throughout this season. And it's only going to ramp up after we start making our push towards the playoffs. We got the play-in, the postseason itself. Man, if you enjoy our podcast so far, you are in for a real treat in the second portion of the season. We're going to get a little break around All-Star Weekend, but it's going to be a lot of good that comes out of it.
100%. And you're only going to be finding this on the best podcast out there, on the Hit Your Free Throws pod. Remember to check out our daily stuff on the TikTok and Instagram. Show love on the YouTube, podcast, all that good stuff. And of course, we're going to be back next week with another episode, probably starting on All-Star Weekend, as well as many other topics as well. But yeah, thank you guys for watching this episode. Hope you have a fantastic day. Take it easy, guys. This is TV. This is Jay signing out.
Peace.